We come to point 16 of our agenda, exchange of views with our friends from the United States. A delegation led by Christopher Murphy, Chair of the Subcommittee on European Affairs of the Senate. And with him are Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, who is the co-chair of the Transatlantic Legislators Dialogue and member of the House Committees on Appropriations, and also Congressman Gregory Meeks from New York, member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and the Committee on Financial Services of the House of Representatives. I think this is a very timely visit of such a high-level delegation from the US Congress. And as you know, this committee has intensively discussed in the past weeks, together with the Committee on Civil Liberties, ways to restore trust in the transatlantic partnership after the disclosures of mass electronic surveillance pursued by the National Security Agency and some European intelligence services. I believe that this is important really to get back confidence, because we want to deepen the transatlantic relationship. We need cooperation in fighting terrorism, and I think it's in our economic and foreign policy interest that we are able, for example, to have successful negotiations on TTIP. And therefore, I think it might be helpful that the questions we discussed today we will get out of the way. And here we see three different points. The one is cooperation of intelligence service fighting terrorism, which is an important positive question. Secondly, how can we target it on that and not to spy on everyone and also on other targets. And the third point is the question which is ahead of that: how can we protect the privacy of our citizens? That means the question of data protection, the data protection umbrella agreement, which Mrs. Reding has negotiated for another time last week in Washington, and I think we had a meeting with Vice President Reding today, the question of safe harbor agreement, and also the cooperation in the question of legal cooperation, mutual cooperation, that question. And I think that's my belief, and that was my impression as I was with the AFET delegation in Washington 3 or 4 weeks ago. First of all, there is a debate in the United States about it. And Senator and Congressman, I know that all of you are very interested in that. And I sometimes say that to friends, with Americans, these bad boys have done that to us. That's the difference to China and Russia. Their democracy and rule of law works in the United States because they have an open debate about it. That makes all the difference to other systems. And therefore, we consider our friends in Congress as really our friends, where parliaments, both sides of the Atlantic, have to cooperate on a right balance between privacy and security is found again. That is always, not a new one, always the responsibility of parliaments to achieve that. And I see you at that point as an ally. We will not agree in every detail today, that's too early, but as a will to discuss that and talk about finding this balance in the right way in order to rebuild confidence that the other questions like TTIP will not be stopped because of the mistrust. And in this sense, I see your visit here, and I have to thank you that you come to us and to discuss the whole day and tomorrow with us the questions here. You have discussed already with the Liebe people, with others, the trade people, and now with us here, and I believe that will lead us to the end of the day to a solution. I believe that this question of data protection should be mostly solved until springtime, because we should not mix it up with the final round on TTIP, because then it might become problematic. It's so already now difficult enough. And therefore, thank you very much that we try to achieve such a thing. And Senator, perhaps you first will take the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Brock. Thank you to the members of your committee for allowing us the chance to come by this evening to exchange views over the future, the present of the transatlantic relationship. We represent a unique delegation traveling this week to Europe. We have been to Berlin. We'll spend today and tomorrow morning here in Brussels and then return home for the Thanksgiving holiday. We are unique in the sense that this is, though a small delegation because of the holiday week, a bipartisan and bicameral delegation. We represent both the House and the Senate, and we represent both the Republican and Democratic Party. The three of us all hold or have held leadership positions with respect to the transatlantic relationship. I am currently the chairman of the Foreign Relations Subcommittee on European Affairs. Representative Meeks formerly held the ranking Democratic position on that committee in the House of Representatives, and Representative Diaz-Balart is no stranger to many in this room as the chairman of the Transatlantic Legislators Dialogue that many of you have taken part in. We are all very vocal supporters, champions of the transatlantic relationship. And we wanted to be here today to make it clear that we represent just the leading edge of a large group of representatives and senators who want to do what it takes in order to restore the trust that has historically underlaid this relationship. The genesis of this trip, frankly, came from a trip that your chairman and members of this committee made to the Congress several weeks ago. We felt that it was important to engage in a reciprocal trip back to make it clear that we believe that this relationship is important, and we realize that this is not just about words, this is also about actions as well. As the chairman said, the debate that you're having right now over privacy protections and about the role of surveillance in your society is not unfamiliar to us. We are having the same conversation in the United States. We do share common values. We share a common value in protecting our citizens from harm. That's why both the United States and European countries have historically engaged in surveillance necessary to protect our countries from terrorist attacks. Of course, we've done much of that in coordination with each other, but we also share the value of personal privacy and freedom from obtrusive surveillance into the lives of our citizens. And we are struggling in the United States in the wake of these revelations with how to square those two values together. These revelations shocked Europeans, but they also shocked Americans as well. We have a system of oversight in the United States Congress of our intelligence authorities, which is rigorous but restricted to a handful of members of Congress on the Select Committees on Intelligence who receive information and briefings that are not necessarily given to the rest of us. Now, in the wake of the revelations of the last several months, we are having in the United States a debate about reining in an intelligence apparatus that, in the minds of many of us, has gotten too large over the last 10 years. Our citizens are demanding new protections. Our citizens are demanding new safeguards. And, well, we can't necessarily guarantee you that one specific proposal will ultimately become law. You earlier, I think, have heard here in the Parliament from Representative Sensenbrenner, who has one proposal. Chairman Feinstein in the Senate has another. I think we can tell you with some confidence that there are going to be changes. At the same time, our President is serious about changes as well, and he has undertaken a review that to many may appear like window dressing, but I am confident is going to lead to substantial changes as well. When the President has undertaken these types of reviews before, whether it be with respect to Afghanistan policy or the amount of military activity happening through through covert means. He has recommended substantial changes, and I think he understands the need for substantial changes here as well. And then lastly, as the chairman pointed out, we also see the potential for progress in terms of the bilateral relationship between the United States and the EU. We've spent much of today in meetings with both members of the Parliament and commissioners who have made it clear that in the conduct of commercial and government-related data privacy moving forward, we need to marry and harmonize your laws here in Europe with our laws here in the United States, and we hope to take part in that. But whatever the avenue for redress may be, whatever the pathway to rebuilding confidence will become, we, more than anything else, wanted to be here today to tell you that we are invested in this relationship in the long run, that we are committed to making it better, and it's this kind of dialogue and exchange of views that will help us do our work in conjunction with you to seek a new pathway forward. Mr. Chairman, maybe with your blessing, I might turn it over to Representative Diaz-Balart and Representative Meeks for a few comments.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will try not to repeat what the chairman of our delegation has just stated. But there's one part that I do need to repeat. That is the fact that we are so invested in this relationship. And look, I don't have to tell members of Parliament that you know, democracy is a challenging issue, and democracies are imperfect. And our relationship, this is not the first time we've had strains. By the way, it will not be the last time that there are strains. But we know, as I'm sure you know, that the best guarantee, whether it's guarantee of freedom, guarantee of security, guarantee of democracy and human rights, and guarantee of the rule of law, is precisely the strength of this relationship, of the transatlantic relationship. So, again, as the Senator has just stated, the debate and the concerns that we feel among our friends here in Europe are exactly the same issues that we are talking about and the same issues that are going to be debated in the United States Congress. And despite the fact that democracy is imperfect, I also am convinced that, again, the President is doing a review, a serious review, and let's be very honest. If that review were not to come back in a way that that is serious, and I'm convinced that it will be, the President will get a lot of pressure in a bipartisan way in both the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. This is an issue that we are taking exceedingly serious. It's an issue that I know the administration is very concerned about. Congress is taking very serious. But again, the purpose of this meeting, of our visit, is to express once again the importance of this relationship. Again, the strongest, the best guarantee of whether it's human rights or security or the rule of law is precisely to make sure that we continue to strengthen this relationship. So it is a privilege. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for allowing us to spend some time here in your committee, allowing us to spend a little bit of time with fellow members of Parliament. So thank you, sir.
Rick? I'll be very brief. I just want to, again, thank you also, Mr. Chairman, and echo the message. The message is that those of us in the United States, those of us in Congress, and the people of the United States understand the significance and the importance of this relationship. We also understand the value of trust, and we know that we have to fix what has taken place so that we can restore the trust that our great, across the Atlantic, that our great countries have long shared. And that's why it is important and significant for us to be here today and take back the message of which we will hear from you, but also important for us to deliver the message to you that we know that we cannot keep our people safe nor have a thriving democracy without you. The world is much smaller than it used to be, and it's going to take us collectively together to figure this out and get it right. In the age of new technology and social media and the internet, we've got to figure out collectively. The United States can't do it by itself, nor can the European countries do it by itself. We have to figure out how we do it collectively. And I think that's the message that we want to make sure that we're extending here, that this relationship matters. This relationship is important. This relationship and what has breached the trust is something that the people of the United States take very seriously. It's not something that we want to just put under the rug. It is something that we are confronting ourselves with as a government and as a people. Because in the end, we do share the same values, the values of democracy, the values of making sure that we have freedoms, and the values of making sure that we have privacy, and the value of making sure that we keep our citizens safe. So I'm delighted to be here, to listen to you, to take questions that you may have, but ultimately to make sure that that strong bond that we have remains and remains forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We come now to the debate. Mr. Salafranca.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to speak in Spanish. Quisiera, en nombre del grupo del...
On behalf of the European People's Party, I'd like to welcome Senator Murphy and Congressman Meeks and Diaz-Balart, who are good friends of this Parliament and have been for a number of years. I'd like to say that we see your visit as an indication of the consideration that you have for the Parliament. My message this evening will be very brief and will be along the lines of what was said in the Shadow Rapporteurs meeting, which took place this morning. I'd like to say that many of us believe that the transatlantic relationship is part of the genetic code of the European Union. And that relationship, my dear friends, has been damaged. You know that as a result of these surveillance activities, several members of the Parliament have asked for negotiations to be brought to a close, and also on the same on the PNR negotiations. We believe that we have to do our utmost to re-establish the right balance. Viviane Reding, who is one of our vice presidents, is preparing a political statement on this issue, and that your visit here is indeed comes at a very opportune moment. We hope that we can re-establish the correct balance of the situation and overcome what has happened.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the senators and congressmen for coming at a very important moment for us. The revelations of Mr. Snowden, I think, have destroyed the trust between the trust that exists between us and the government of the United States and with businesses in the United States. But even before that happened, there were some points of concern to do, for example, with the PNR agreement and the SWIFT agreement. In the committee, the Libe committee here, we, during a visit, were not able to speak to the congressman that we wanted to speak to, and we are left with difficulties understanding the way that the constitutions that we have interplay and the role of privacy. We know that privacy is important, but it seems to me that we're taking different approaches in how we combat terrorism. As a Spaniard, I've suffered a great deal from terrorism, but we've done our utmost to make sure that we worked within the law. Preventing terrorism and preventing crime cannot be something that allows us to neglect other values. we cannot have systems of mass surveillance in which there is no judicial oversight, at least under our constitutions and legal systems. It's therefore important that for us there is a kind of government which has oversight, but it has to be a government that respects the way that we do trade and the values that we have. This is why the current situation is very serious, and I hope that we can re-establish trust soon.
30 seconds, otherwise we will not make it. The floor has now Baroness Ludford, who will give a good example.
I'll try, Chairman. It is indeed a great pleasure to welcome Senator Church and Congressman Diaz-Balart and Meeks, and of course we know Mario Diaz-Balart very well. I'm the Vice Chair of the Parliament's US Delegation, and we work very well with him. I'm also involved on the Civil Liberties Justice Committee on data protection issues. And it seems to me that we do have a very big challenge, which is why it is so important that you are here and clearly taking this issue very seriously. Because I think we do need to reach a new grand bargain, bringing all the strands together, not necessarily through the same channels, because there are different channels, particularly the trade, the data privacy, the intelligence issues, mixing sort of who's competent for what. But I think unless we hang together, we're going to hang separately. There are voices, noises off in this town who are, in my view, somewhat irresponsibly in some cases, calling for suspension of the TTIP negotiations. There are voices saying, oh, keep your data in Europe, we'll have European cloud services, you don't need to transfer it, and so on, which echoes a degree of protectionism. That's not the way that I want to go, and I believe my group wants to go. But we need to, perhaps out of this crisis, find an opportunity to try and settle some of the issues which have actually been bothering us over a good period now, on how we get the privacy framework right, both in the commercial sphere and in the law enforcement sphere. So, I would just reinforce really back to you the message that you're giving us. And if you could encourage a good debate in all European capitals, as was happening in Washington, including London, I think that would be very helpful.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to speak in German. I come from Germany, and I am a member of the US delegation, and I'm very happy to see that you've come along to our meeting this afternoon. I know you were in Berlin yesterday, and obviously as I said, I'm very happy to see that you have come to Brussels, because there is the link between Germany and the US, so that's very important. So I don't think I would necessarily need to hide from you that there is quite a lot of uproar about what we've found out over the past few months. But I think it's a very good sign that we are trying to have a dialogue. And I've talked to a lot of young people who are very active on the internet and Facebook, and I've heard back from them that there are a lot of concerns because they sort of feel, if I want to travel to the United States, am I going to have problems trying to get into the country? So I think we really ought to realise on both sides that we have to do something to rebuild the trust. So for this reason, I'm very happy that you're here today. And a colleague has already mentioned that we have the free trade agreement, and that is going to give us a good way to integrate data protection. from the European Parliament, we are taking a very close look at data protection, and it is a very important aspect of the free trade agreement. And thank you once again for attending the committee this afternoon.
Thank you, President. Very well welcome over here from the European Conservative and Reformist Group. We are probably the strongest Atlanticist group in the Parliament. We regard the relations with the United States as our #1 priority in foreign policy, and the two continents, not just the United States, Canada, particularly the Pacific Coast, Latin American countries, Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and on the other side, Brazil. We see the future in terms of TTIP, in terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, in extending democracy, human rights and free trade across to your part of the world and to the Pacific. And we are firmly opposed to any suspension of SWIFT or the PNR or suspending the TTIP talks, which are just commencing now. Obviously, there are so many areas of common interest. I mean, I've just come back from Montenegro. I'm the rapporteur of the Parliament for Montenegro. They are hoping to become or be invited to join NATO. They are waiting for the American invitation. And there is a common overlap in the agenda in terms of EU accession for Montenegro as well as NATO accession. So if you have any influence with your government, please put a plug in for Montenegro, tiny Montenegro, a democracy which shares our values and is now an EU candidate but also like to join NATO. But there are so many other areas: the Middle East peace plan, over the Quartet, Geneva II over Iran, containing North Korea, Chinese expansionism in the East China Seas, Syria. These are areas where, without American cooperation speaking in one voice, particularly in the Security Council, the EU alone and the Member States cannot do it. As far as the NSA is concerned, I understand that you have to do your... Sorry? Well, the NSA is very important, Mr. Chairman. And I would only make one plug: can we have equal redress for EU citizens before your courts as well as US citizens? That requires primary US legislation to give us equal redress before your courts. Otherwise, what the NSA does is probably absolutely necessary
in the fight
against terrorism.
Mr. Angourakis.
Thank you, Chair. For our visitors from the United States, I'm a representative of the Greek Communist Party. I'm Greek. I'd like to tell them the following. First of all in this room agree that there was a political decision that led to the measures to collect all these data. It's not just a privacy matter for people. It's a matter of a war, as I would call it, between the United States and its allies on many areas concerning intelligence gathering as well. That's what we hear from the press. Second, thanks to Snowden's revelations, and you've said that the American public opinion has been shocked by all this spying. But I haven't seen the US government consider Mr. Snowden positively. A lot of people in your country call him a traitor. Following his revelations, we have found out that similar practices are followed by many European intelligence services. So it's not just the US intelligence services that are to blame. It's the intelligence services in our countries as well. Because on both sides of the Atlantic, we have capitalist governments which do not respect human rights nor liberties. This has been proven, at least on this issue. Thirdly, please try your best for a matter which is very important for many Europeans. First of all, to lift the embargo on Cuba, and 5, to free the 5 Cubans that are held in US prisons. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ja, herzlichen Dank.
Mr. Pottering, yes, thank you very much. I'd like to say to our American friends, and I'd like to stress friends, I have asked to take the floor so that you have an idea of somebody like me, a Christian Democrat, what I think of all of this. I've been a member of the European Parliament for very many years, and I've chaired a political group, but I am very concerned about the way in which the American intelligence services have acted and behaved. You're governed by a rule of law, and this is the kind of thing that should not happen in a country of that kind. And then, of course, for a number of years, I've been doing a lot to sort out the situation in Guantanamo Bay. I'm very much against terrorism. I want to fight terrorism, but you can't keep people locked up in a place like that for so many years. You have to have due process and a fair trial. So I would really like to ask you to clarify these issues and that you do everything that's necessary to control and keep in check your intelligence services. We expect this of you because you are our friends, because if a democracy and a rule of law breaks down, then everything breaks down and goes kaput. And to the colleague from New York, this relationship matters, and that is why we are so concerned. We would have expected other countries to act like this, but not the United States.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. I appreciated very much your initial question, what it takes to restore trust. Just two simple answers from a European point of view. First, dismantle the current huge surveillance apparatus you built. Is not democratic, does not protect, it damages civil liberties, and is not useful to fight terrorism. Second, learn from the European experience in fighting terrorism and organized crime. We had a terrorist problem in the 80s in this continent, which was bigger than yours, and we faced it without building any huge apparatus. We fought it respecting civil liberties. We never introduced death penalty. We never did summary justice. And we succeed. Terrorism in Europe today is not a major threat. And we fought also organized crime, which in some of our countries is even bigger than terrorism as a threat, much bigger. And we fought it in Italy and in other countries with the instrument of democracy, with the fair trials, and we have been terribly effective in a continent that is bigger than the United States, and from a population point of view, and also from the economic point of view. So, learn from our experience. We can be our friend also in the future, if you do this. Thank you.
Now the floor is with Mr. Cassi.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished guests, thank you for your hospitality in Washington. It was very useful and fruitful, and it is important that we continue immediately, 3 weeks after. This is important. I want to mention the fact that we need more effective and more credible control over intelligence, not just in the States, but also in our member countries. This is a common challenge, it is a common homework, and it is also a challenge for our domestic parliaments in our member countries. What I want to say is something about the future. TTIP agreement is extremely important. But I'm afraid that people on both sides of the Atlantic, they are not aware of the importance of this agreement for our better chances for the future. Our competitiveness needs to be improved. We need a growth of our economy. And I hope that you will be able to spread this message in the States when you will be back. And finally, Mr. Tannock already mentioned that stability in Europe is extremely important, and he mentioned Montenegro. We were chatting about that in Washington as well. Enlargement brings stability for the Western Balkans, and it is a very right momentum to do something like that, especially taking into account negative developments in the case of Ukraine, and this would be a very positive example for the European continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming to the Parliament. I think we all agree that we have to do it collectively, and this relation matters, and we share the same values. The question is, do we share the same priorities? When on our recent trip to Washington, we heard that Americans give priority to security and Europeans to privacy. And I recently saw some Americans who challenged whether there was a concept such as privacy. So how do you see these differences, and do they really form a basis for us to understand each other? The second question is related to there is like-minded nations that have agreements not to spy on each other. I think it's called Five Eyes or something. Do you think that this would also be possible between yourselves and the European countries?
Chairman, thank you very much indeed. Welcome to our friends. I want to change the subject. When is the US Congress, both House and Senate, going to take an even-handed approach to the Middle East in relation to Palestine and Israel? Have any of you ever been to Palestine and seen for yourself what is going on there?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I would also like to welcome all of you. I'd like to welcome all of you. The talks that we had in Washington were very open, they were very constructive, and I must say that I'm very happy to see that you've accepted the invitation to have these regular talks between you and us in order to perhaps prevent certain irritations and in order to make sure that we're all properly informed. And I am convinced that the cooperation between you and the European Union when it comes to security and preventing crime and terrorism is something that is positive and important, and I think we've managed to achieve some very good results. But there is this annoyance, there is this irritation because of the NSA activities. And when we were in the United States, we heard that NSA is ignoring the law every day and is totally out of control. And I feel perhaps the Freedom Act could help here. But I do have a question. If we take the Freedom Act that is currently being negotiated and discussed, to what extent is it going to be able to restore trust? So that in a way that we could have clear rules as to the kind of services that can be carried out and the kind of limitations and restrictions to data collection, and in such a way that this will restore trust and avoid future irritations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator and Congressman. We are partly members of the Transatlantic Legislators Dialogue, so welcome here. But I think we have then, and therefore, the responsibility to speak about the next concrete steps, what we have to undertake as legislators. And I think, and it would be good if you could, additionally to that what you have already positioned here, tell us what you are in Congress, in the House, are undertaking, in the Senate, to overcome this excess of what have done the NSA. And I think that is also our responsibility to think over what we are doing to minimize and to overcome the excess of certain secret services in Europe. Because I'm coming from a country where in East Germany we had the experience in the past. So I have a déjà vu in a certain way. And that, I think, is destabilizing the democracy at all. And therefore, I think this part of history and of presence is not part of our values. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I thank you very much for your visit and cooperation. And security is our common challenge. In the modern world, it's indivisible. We can't provide for it separately. And it is based on trust. Now the question is that trust has been damaged, and I'm worried about unequal treatment or providing privacy guarantees for US citizens and EU citizens. At the same time, we certainly need a balanced approach. Your presence here is a promising guarantee that we can agree once again. And as for the US-EU free trade negotiations, I think they need to proceed. This is a historic chance. We are both responsible for it and will both benefit from it. And also, I agree that the SWIFT treaty has not to be suspended.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Voy a hablar.
Thank you.
Spanish very shortly. Gracias por.
Thank you very much for coming. I met you in Washington just a few weeks ago when we were addressing the issue of the transatlantic relation and the values that embodies. I have a question for you. When do you think that the review process ordered by President Obama will reach its conclusion? The second thing I have to say is a comment. The transatlantic relationship is so important that it has to be accompanied by positive symbols. One of these is the annual summit that we have together. We've changed treaties recently. We now have a permanent president, Mr. Van Rompuy, who will be in office for 5 years. Since President Clinton, we've had meetings with the presidents, but these are not taking place with President Obama. So what I want to know is that do you feel in Washington that the same kinds of positive symbols are also necessary?
Well, again, thank you all for your comments, your sentiments, your concerns, and let me try to, maybe in a very short period of time, answer a few of the issues that have been raised, and I'll let my colleagues speak. Well, I'm sure we'll answer a few others. First, I think it is important to recognize that we are largely talking about two separate and somewhat distinct issues. We're talking about an issue related to political espionage. And I don't want to speak for other members of my delegation, but I think many of us in the Congress believe that we have crossed a line in the way in which we have conducted that espionage. We went to Germany prior to our visit here, specifically because we know of the trust that has been breached through the tapping of the Chancellor's phone. And I hope that one of the results of the President's review, which we expect by the end of the year, will be a change. A substantial change in the way that we conduct political surveillance. We, of course, are not alone in the world in conducting these operations, but clearly the cost-benefit analysis has not worked in terms of the activities that we have undertaken. We are then talking about a different set of surveillance techniques that happen with the gathering, for instance, of metadata, done largely in coordination with your country's intelligence services. And that is a conversation that is appropriate to have here, but probably more appropriate to have on a bilateral basis. Because to the extent that privacy has been breached, the solution lies in better procedures both from United States intelligence services, but also from member state services as well. I think that's an incredibly important project, but one that we have to acknowledge has to happen in a bilateral basis. Second, I appreciate the comments from people here who believe that we should not tie agreements that are in existence, that are serving to protect our two nations as we speak, such as the SWIFT agreement or the passenger names database, to the resolution of many of these issues, and who believe that we shouldn't suspend TTIP negotiations. We are here to make it clear to you that you don't need to deliver an additional message to the United States by compromising our collective security through the suspension of these agreements. We are sincere and believe the Congress is sincere in figuring a pathway forward as we execute existing agreements and negotiate future agreements. Third, 4 points that I'll make. Third, we are all products of our own collective experience. And there has been no shortage of damage here in Europe done by terrorists. I would disagree with the notion that terrorism is not a threat here in Europe today. We are products of our experience over the last 10 years. We are still dealing with the fallout from thousands of Americans killed in the largest scale terrorist attack of our generation, and the belief that it was a failing in U.S. intelligence that in part allowed that to happen. Now, what has occurred is a massive buildup of our intelligence services that we now believe that we have to right size. But our experience is generated by what happened over 10 years ago. And I think we are now reconciling what has happened since, because our experience is also one of respect for civil liberties. And so I hope you realize that the discussions that we're having are serious. They range from amendments that would allow companies that have received these warrants to disclose that information, to much more serious reform like that presented by Representative Sensenbrenner and Senator Leahy that would essentially end the collection of metadata. Despite the fact that many people in the U.S. intelligence service believe that there have been 50-plus different attacks that have been prevented because of that collection. Here's my last point. We struggle with how to keep our country safe as you struggle with how to keep your country safe. And this is just me speaking. We can have a strategy of chasing terrorists down around the globe, engaging in massive surveillance in order to find them. Or, well, it's not or we can also make a decision that we are going to diminish the reasons why these terrorists are able to recruit people to their ranks in the first place, and how the United States and our allies conduct ourselves when it comes to respecting civil liberties and preserving human rights is a big part of the long-term story of how we ultimately protect our nations from terrorism. I have never believed that there is a choice to be made between protecting America and protecting American civil liberties. And that is the conversation that we want to have communally with all of you. Surveillance is not enough to protect us. We also have to diminish the reasons for which people around the world try to organize against us, and that is the basic message that I bring to you today. You have a group of members of Congress and the Senate who are sincere in engaging in that endeavor with you.
Mario?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I'll try to hit a couple of issues. To the point of the difference between the attitude on security and privacy that exists between Europe and the United States, you know, I think we're all trying to strike that balance between privacy without security doesn't get you anywhere, and security without privacy also doesn't get you anywhere. So the reality is that I think we're all trying to strike that balance, and we all deal with our own realities and our own experiences to bring to the table. And you know, the memory of 9/11 is very fresh. The memory of the Boston Marathon bombing is very fresh. And Europe you've also obviously suffered immensely from terrorist attacks. So I don't think there's that much of a difference as far as I think we all have to strike for that perfect balance, knowing that we're never going to find a perfect balance. I share what I've heard from a number of you about and our esteemed chairman of the delegation also just mentioned about whether it's SWIFT or TTIP. And the reality is that those are two issues that are not issues that are, you know, only good. They are important for the United States, but they're also equally as important to Europe. And I would also argue that they are equally as important, or potentially even more important, if you believe in freedom and democracy and human rights and the rule of law around the world. I think that's a game changer for the entire world, and we should not forget the big picture there. Yes, we've heard it time and time again. Clearly, trust has been hurt. And I think one of the things that is important and that you're hearing from us, and you can continue to hear from us, is that we are here precisely because we understand that that's been affected. And by the way, I think part of reestablishing trust is having some pretty basic concepts. Number one is know who your friends are and treat them accordingly. And frankly, know who your enemies are and treat them accordingly. And we all recognize that as well. I want to go back to Mr. Milan Mon's very specific suggestion, and I think very opportune suggestion, de la Cumbre, which I think is a very, very specific, interesting proposal that I clearly will bring back to our colleagues. So I thank you for that. There have been a lot of other comments, Mr. Chairman, and I know that I don't want to take a lot more of the time, and you've been very kind. I will lastly, though, let's not use, as I mentioned, I will end where I started. Look, you know, democracy is flawed, huh? It's imperfect. The difference is that in democracy we can correct issues without fearing retribution. And I know that there's, some would like to talk about, well, there are capitalists or democratic countries that violate human rights. By the way, sure, absolutely. But would any of us trade the imperfections of democracy and of free countries that with the utopia of, communist China or communist Vietnam or communist Cuba or communist North Korea? I know the answer to that is no. But again, thank you for your friendship. Thank you for allowing us to be here. It's a privilege and an honor, Mr. Chairman, to be in your committee. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Diaz-Balart said part of what I wanted to say is that democracy, it is one of the messiest forms of government that one could ever endure. But it is the best form of government that I know. And as I listened to the speakers today, it showed democracy at work because I heard differences in ideas in a committee where you're free to speak about those differences of ideas, and there is debate among you, I'm sure, when we're not here, that is very, very heated at times and very different, with different people taking different positions. The reason why I go there, because I wanted to answer one of the questions that was asked, well, when will the United States process end? Or when will the Congress do something? I want you to know that we are concerned, but democracy is taking place in the United States also. There's differences of opinion. And to come to a consensus of that opinion will take some time. We have various bills because people in the United States have been affected by the NSA issue. But there's various thoughts, just as there are here, on what to do and how to do it. We have, and in the United States right now, I want you to know it's not based upon political party. Because of the bills that are currently being debated, you have both parties on different sides of issues. You have what we call strange bedfellows. You have some of the most conservative Republicans and the most liberal Democrats on the same bill. And then you have other individuals who have been in the middle who are not sure which way to go. I have said that, we've had an expression going on, in one of our presidential elections. I was for it before I was against it. But that happens sometimes in democracies. I can tell you that I was for the Patriot Act before I was against it. Because I'm learning from my experiences of what's the right way to go and what's the right thing to do. And that is the current debate that we have going on in Washington, D.C. right now and in America. And what my main concern is, I don't want you to take the fact that we're having that debate as a sense of we don't care what has taken place and or of the trust that has been breached with you. Because in my day in Berlin and my day here, I'm hearing some feeling that, well, maybe we don't matter anymore to the United States. Maybe there's this pivot to the east, or maybe there's some other things that you want. No, we know that our ties with you are too strong and have been too long for us to sever them. We know that there's been a breach in trust, and we've got to do the best that we can to fix that breach. And we're here today. Other members was going to come, but we're here today on a week where we celebrate Thanksgiving, on a week when we have told our families that it was more important for us to be here to have a dialogue and conversation with you because you are so important to us. I think that we are so tied in together, we cannot allow We cannot allow something to pull us apart. And that's what happens when you have good friends. You can sit down and you can tell us the truth. And we better sit down and listen to you and take it. And we've got to come back to you and tell you the truth. And then we can figure out collectively where we can find that meeting in the middle and move on. Because guess what? The standards, if standards are going to be set at a high level, it's going to be by us. No one else is going to set those high standards. Their standards will be very low. We need to set the standards, and we need to set them high for others to follow, as opposed to following low standards set by someone else.
Thank you very much. And I have to thank all three of you to come here to have these debates yesterday and today in Berlin and Brussels. And I think this open debate has shown that on both sides it's a good will to find a solution. That's my impression. And I must say what just Greg Meeks said, it's the way, the meaningful thing in the middle, the balance, that's what counts, what we have to identify. And we know that we have in this data protection, privacy things, different legal traditions. But nevertheless, we have to find a solution this time where borders do not exist anymore. Because this is a classical question where we have to find transnational solutions for nobody borders exist anymore and do not mean any protection, especially in this question anymore, for anybody. And therefore, because of this technology development, we have to find a solution. If I see our friend Tune Kellam, his country was the first victim of cybercrime attack. And also this question, privacy, cybercrime, terrorism, that must be found somewhere in the middle, the right balance. But I believe total security means total loss of freedom. So sometimes freedom means also a risk. And a totally secure country I would not like to live. That is Aldous Huxley, Mr. Orwell, and such things. And therefore, I think I'm happy that we had this discussion, that we continue these discussions. I've heard just an hour ago that Mike Rogers wants to come to the European Parliament. This will be especially fun, I think, this debates. But nevertheless, I think we have started a debate, and the debate will have a result between Democrats. Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.